Hello, hello. Welcome back to Mistress of the Dam. If you are new here, welcome. This is where we believe all knowledge is worth having and freedom of speech is our most important right. If you believe that too, then you too are damned, and I am your Mistress Katrina. Welcome to hell. This week, we finally wrap up our trip through the Gulag Archipelago with Volume 3 by Aleksandry Solzhenitsyn. This one was an odd mixture of hope and despair. Hope because Solzhenitsyn spends a significant portion of the book describing ways in which Czechs fought back. Despair because ultimately authoritarian regimes authoritate, and in this case they did so with tanks. So the book starts by describing how Stalin expanded the existing network of gulags, because they didn't have enough, from not just corrective labor camps, which is where everybody was kept initially, but he expanded this to include special labor camps. The special labor camps was where he wanted the 58s, remember political prisoners are 58s, he wanted those separated out so that all the 58s were in the special labor and the rest of them, the thieves and the common criminals, were kept in the corrective labor camps. In this, Stalin made a miscalculation. When all the inmates were thrown together in one big pot, the 58s had to worry about everything. They had to worry about the guards and the stool pigeons on one side, who are basically all one thing, and then they had to worry on the other side about thieves and being robbed blind of the little bit that they had left. Basically, they had a war on two fronts, which, as we know from World War II, did not work out so well for Germany. Stalin should have paid attention to that lesson. When he separated them out, leaving the thieves and common criminals in corrective labor camps and putting the 58s into special labor camps, the 58s realized they only had one front left. It would be the guards and the stool pigeons. And if they were political prisoners, which is what 58 meant, they should be political. And all the stool pigeons who had been working with the guards started dying. And not mysteriously. It's not like they just suddenly didn't wake up one day messily, noisily. A lot of throats were slit. People were garroted. And there is no question that the Czechs were making a statement. If you collaborate with the guards, you will end badly. As a result of this separation, escape actually became a little bit easier for a while. Not that the guards were less diligent, it's that the inmates were aware that whoever they took with them, whoever they partnered with on their escape attempt, could be trusted, because they were killing the stool pigeons. So if you wanted to escape and you were working together, you could escape. Escape was not always successful, at least not long term, because they were always caught, or maybe the successful simply did not know that Solzhenitsyn was looking for these stories, and so he wasn't able to report on truly successful attempts who made it very far away and never looked back. Ultimately, the Czechs started a slow burn rebellion. The artists started writing, not writing with paper and pen, but they started composing poems and prose in their minds, and they kind of memorized what they wrote. I kind of think this is why arts are not taught in schools. I mean, first off, a public school is not going to teach you what you need to know to run your own life, and I'm not talking about things like how to change a tire and how to file taxes. Yes, those are important, but they don't teach things like the Constitution in public school anymore. They don't have those on the wall so that you know what your rights are and what the government is and is not allowed to do, because a stupid populace is a compliant populace. All right, that's reinforced again and again throughout the Gulag Archipelago, is that if you don't know what your rights are, you can't fight for your rights. And the Czechs didn't know what their rights were. They were never told what their rights were. I think this is why we're not taught art. Good art teaches you to look outside the norm, to see the world from a different perspective. The only perspective taught right now is the leftist perspective. That's the only ideology you find at any public school these days, are the leftist ideologies. And I'm not talking about liberal, because that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm talking about left. Left, left, left. Anybody right of Mao Zedong is considered a right-wing extremist. We already know how bad Mao is. Start saying anybody right of Stalin is considered an extremist. So we get good art, which teaches you to look outside. Bad art is meant to humiliate, degrade, propagandize the power in charge by propping up corruption. And the media is fully complicit in this. It was complicit in socialist Russia. It's surely complicit now in 21st century America. That was a tangent. I didn't mean to go there. So the artists started accompanying. Then in Akabastus, which is where Solzhenitsyn was interned, they had a Kishkin. Now, it's hard to tell from this description if Kishkin was this particular inmate's last name or if it was sort of an informal job description. From what it sounds like, a Kishkin in Russia is like a court jester in England. They are someone who can speak bold truths to the king who doesn't want to hear them with impunity. And the Kishkin they had pointed out the absurdities of camp life repeatedly with jokes that the inmates thought were hilarious and the guards thought not so much. But since he didn't say anything truly out of line, he just used the truth to highlight the absurdity of the situation. He got away with it. One example, the one that actually made me laugh out loud, is at one point they were showing a film in camp, and it was a packed theater because it was like Sunday, which is the inmates' one rest day where they didn't have to work, usually. Sometimes they had to. But it was a film in camp, and the theater was, of course, packed. Some of the guards showed up, and they wanted to watch the movie, and so they tried to push some inmates off a bench so that they could watch the movie. And the inmates didn't want to move because it's Sunday, it's their day, they want to watch this damn movie. And Kishkin said, "Now lads, really, you know the warders can't see the film anywhere else. Let's move." It's absurd, right? They're guards. They can leave the camp at the end of the day. They can go to the movies whenever they want. The theater erupted in laughter at the guards' expense because obviously it's absurd. They're free. The camp guards complained to the camp commander, but nothing happened to Kishkin because after all, he had only been supporting the guards' authority in making the inmates move. Pointing out absurdity is a comedian's job. That's what they do. And the comedians truly are our last line of defense against the insanity that is taking over the world right now. And that bold man did it very well. Eventually, Ekabastus had a hunger strike, which is remarkable. And the inmates were already being starved to death. They were given less than they should be eating for a healthy sedentary man. Remember, they were getting like 1,000 calories a day. 2,000 is normal. They should have had 3 to 4 given the labor they were performing. But for 3 days, they refused to eat, and they refused to do any work. There is strength in numbers, and a bit of truth to "they can't kill us all." And even those inmates who were so emaciated that not eating for 3 days could easily put them into a downward spiral that only ends in death, well, and there I go. See, authoritarian regimes, I'm torn between being horrified and so angry. Okay, come on, Katrina. I don't think I put on the good mascara today. I don't think it's waterproof. I can't even imagine the courage that took. Okay, come on. Nope, I did not put on the good mascara. Damn it. Alright, world. Next time I announce I'm going to read a book this sad, remind me to put on the waterproof mascara before reviewing it. Okay. Eventually, word of that hunger strike reached other camps, resulting in Kengir. Now, at Kengir camp, the guards were prone to using the inmates for target practice. Several were shot and either wounded or killed outright, and this was already sort of starting the slow burn at the camp. But the one that kind of blew the lid off the powder keg was when a guard shot and killed Aleksandry Solzhenitsyn, who was called the evangelist in camp. Now, Solzhenitsyn was 9 years, 9 months into a 10-year sentence. He had 3 months left. All right, that's it. He stepped outside his workshop to relieve himself and was shot. He did something he did every day for those 9 years and 9 months. Everybody poops, right? In this case, he was just peeing, but whatever. He stepped outside and was shot. The guards tried to drag the body to the boundary line so that they could claim this man who was 3 months from freedom had been shot trying to escape. But the inmates stopped them. A full rebellion ensued. The guards and camp administrators were chased out of camp by angry mobs of inmates who then took over. For 40 days, the inmates ran the camp. They broke down the wall between the men's and women's camps. Couples who had never met in person, never seen each other, whose only contact had been through notes tossed over the wall between the camps met in real life. They consummated marriages that had been performed through the wall by imprisoned priests. Ultimately, this standoff ended with tanks, because authoritarians authoritate, just like Waco. I shouldn't have said that. There's a lot of very key differences, right? I mean, the 58s were all there for having a thought, and David Koresh was a child molester. So there's the only parallel there is the tanks, but still, authoritarian regimes, they destroy their citizens. It's what they do. It's the only way they can keep power, because they're corrupt. Solzhenitsyn next describes life in exile. I misunderstood what he meant by exile. I think at one point I assumed exile just meant out of the country. No, nay. That's to be expelled from the country, and then you go whatever country will take you in, that's where you go. What Solzhenitsyn means by expelled is forcibly moved somewhere else and unable to leave the area that's been designated for you to live in. That's what happened to the kulaks in Ukraine. They were forcibly removed from their successful farms, the farms that were, feeding everybody, and relocated to Siberia to work on collective farms, trying to grow things in the permafrost, which it might shock you to learn you really can't grow anything in the permafrost. It's, cold. Unless they resisted, in which case they were, jailed as 58s for anti-Soviet sentiment. Solzhenitsyn himself was exiled to Kazakhstan, where he was lucky enough to be the only qualified math teacher in the area, so he was able to work as a teacher during his exile. And when not teaching, he began writing. The final part of this book addresses how Solzhenitsyn came to write this book. After the release of One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, he received letters, so many letters, from people who thought the book was garbage, who thought he should have told the story from the camp guard's perspective, which I don't know how he'd have done that. He wasn't a camp guard, but that's what they seemed to think, to people who were still interned at the archipelago, wondering why their stories were not being told, and letting him know that it was not over. Despite Stalin being dead and the book taking place in 1951, hell continued. And so Solzhenitsyn quietly put out the word that he wanted their stories. He asked several former Czechs to help him write the book, but they all declined, which he did not blame them for. That there was a good chance that he would be imprisoned for writing this book, and he was ultimately arrested and charged with treason. He's bloody lucky that they didn't just put a bullet in him for having written this book, and they very well might have if it hadn't really received a Nobel Prize that put some pressure on Russia to not just kill him, or the Soviet Union, I should say, Russia being a different entity, but the Soviet Union was put under pressure at that point to not just execute this man who had won a Nobel Prize for literature for revealing what was going on in Russia. He includes a very useful chapter detailing how nothing changed. The courts still have their quotas, or at least they did as of 1971. Now, obviously, it's been 50 years since this book was published. One would hope things had changed in Russia in 50 years, but I am not conversant in the Russian penal system to say that they have or haven't. One would hope. But at that time, in the 70s, the court still had quotas to fill, the minimum number of people who must be incarcerated to justify the expense of keeping the courts active on a state budget. And he tells you how to identify what the upcoming wave of charges will be, so that if you got somebody you want out, you want in prison, just make sure you hit them with those charges. Hint: the corrupt media is very involved in this process. You can look at our own news cycles for similarities, so you know what exactly you're going to be canceled for. You piss people off. Ultimately, when the Gulag Archipelago was released and published, Solzhenitsyn received a Nobel Prize in Literature for his works. He did not go in person to receive his prize, fearing that he would be denied re-entry into the Soviet Union, which is exactly what the Soviet Union had planned. Because he refused, they arrested him, tried him for treason, and expelled him from the country. Expulsion is what I thought was meant by exile, and that's incorrect. He was expelled from the country, which made him stateless. They took away his citizenship, said you're no longer a citizen of the Soviet Union. Whatever country will take you in, go there. And America took him in, because this was still during the Cold War, and we were like, hey, we'll take that guy, come on over. So he came to the United States, where he was granted asylum and took up residency in Vermont until the Soviet Union fell in 1991. Now, presumably he still lived there from 91 to 94, but in 1994 he did return to Russia, where he lived out his days before dying on August 3rd, 2008. And with that, my friends, we are off the Gulag Archipelago. I'm exhausted. This book tore me up. I mean, for writing it, Solzhenitsyn was called dangerous by that scintillating intellectual Jean-Paul Sartre. You might know him as the father of postmodernism. Yeah, because that was a good contribution, almost as useful as the Communist Manifesto. I think you should read the Gulag Archipelago. I think you need to understand just how dangerous socialism is. It's not understood these days. Everybody knows how bad fascism is because the media pushes that, and I have no objection to that. It is a horrible ideology. We're going to learn more about that next month. But socialism is as bad, if not worse, and that's never told by the media. That's not who butters their bread, so they're going to just keep touting how much better communism is. Socialism, communism, they're the same thing. You don't get to communism without socialism, and socialism always leads to communism. And I think everybody who's ever been forced to read the Communist Manifesto should balance that knowledge by reading the consequences of that train of thought. I think you need to know that postmodernist thought is the gateway to hell, and the Gulag Archipelago is where that gateway leads. That's it for this week. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, share my videos, and let me know what you think in the comments. I will see you all next week when we move on to something a little bit lighter, James Monroe. Bye.